case in point.
It was Friday at Zachary Hall, and that meant shish kebab for the 600 residents. Early in the afternoon, Taylor, a kitchen worker, took 40 pounds of marinated round steak from the walk-in cooler and began the long process of cutting it into cubes. Shortly after he began working, he was interrupted by a phone call.
Hi, Taylor. You've got a phone call.
Oh, thanks.
Hey, you've got an awful lot of meat out here at one time.
Yeah, well, I got lots of prep.
Aren't you going to take it back to the walk-in? Taylor!
What should Taylor's coworker do now? What should Taylor have done in the first place? What would you do?
The Educational Foundation of the National Restaurant Association presents the Serving Safe Food video series, Preparation, Cooking, and Service, with cook Joe Garvey.
A potential tragedy could be averted there at Zachary Hall. How? Well, I'm going to show you how. Let me introduce the topic by getting you into the flow, the food flow, how food travels through your facility. The food flow starts back there in the loading area where it is received. After that, it goes on into storage. At every step, your goal is to prevent contamination and bacterial growth. Okay, then it comes out of storage for preparation. That's where we pick up our story. We're going to handle the food, working with it inside the temperature danger zone. Lots to talk about there. Then it is cooked. The key here is to get it to the correct temperature. Then we serve it. Our senior server, Sherry, will show us how to prevent contamination there. Hot hold. Emphasize hot. We'll talk about it. But the food flow doesn't end here. Leftover food that can be used later has to be cooled and stored properly. Otherwise, you can't use it later. Reheating, we make it hot, we make it fast, or we don't make it. Now, you need to know that these are critical steps in the food flow, especially when it comes to serving safe food. Why? Because this is when bacterial growth is most likely to happen. See, this is when food is out in a nice warm environment. This is when we're handling it, when it may be placed near other food. So we have to be very careful and do everything we can to prevent the growth of bacteria and prevent contamination. There's that word again. Let's start by defining it. What am I talking about? Contamination basically is the presence of something harmful in food that doesn't belong there. Bacteria, virus, glass, a piece of metal, hair, and on and on. Some of it you can see, and while it shouldn't have been there in the first place, at least you know what you're dealing with. You can't see bacteria. They're microscopic organisms, something actually living in the food, especially food that is rich in protein, like meat, fish, and poultry. How do they get in there? There are lots of opportunities. Could have happened on the farm, maybe in the processing plant. The delivery person could have contaminated it. Proper cooking will kill these microorganisms, and that's a big part of what I'm going to talk about in this program. But I want to mention cross-contamination first. Cross-contamination is when harmful bacteria go from one food to another. Example, raw meat containing bacteria is prepped on a cutting board. That's fine. But a little later, fresh vegetables for the salad bar are cut up using the same knife and the same cutting board. Bacteria from the meat cross. That's where we get the name cross-contamination, cross to the vegetables by way of the board or knife. Now, the meat will be cooked and the bacteria will be killed, so the meat will be okay. But what about the vegetables? See, they go out there just as they are. That's one way for an outbreak to occur. But we're here to talk about how to prevent all that. It's prep time.
Proper ways of handling food.
Like I said, when you have to handle food, it's sitting out there in the food temperature danger zone. Anything from 40 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit or 4.4 to 60 degrees Celsius. Bacteria will grow and multiply very fast in the temperature danger zone. What do you know? 80 degrees in here, right in the middle of the temperature danger zone. You catch my point? Bacteria love this kind of environment. They thrive in it. So we have to control the amount of time they spend in there. Here's how we do that. First, you've got to keep the time in the temperature danger zone to a minimum. Don't take the food out of storage until you need it. Second, work with only the amount of food you can prepare in a short amount of time. Deal with it in batches. This is something we call batch cookery, breaking down a large job into smaller batches. Third, prepare food with suitable utensils and on an appropriate cutting surface. And you must clean and sanitize your utensils and cutting board before and after you use them. Fourth, thawing. If you thaw food in the refrigerator, sure, it will take longer to thaw than if you leave it out, but it will be safer for you and your customers. Never thaw food by leaving it on the counter. The problem is the surface will thaw first while the inside is still frozen. While you leave it out still longer to thaw the middle, bacteria will multiply on the surface. Instead, thaw one of these ways. In the refrigerator, 40 degrees or colder. If it's not securely packaged, place the food on the bottom shelf where juices won't drip onto any ready-to-eat food and contaminate it. Thaw as a part of the cooking process. Thaw in a microwave, provided the food will be cooked immediately. Or thaw in potable running water at 70 degrees or below. Potable, meaning drinkable. Clean so it won't contaminate it. That's it. That's how to thaw. There are no other ways. Oh, and one more thing. Whether thawing or prepping food, use FIFO. First in, first out. Take out the food first that was delivered or prepared first. That has the oldest date on the packaging. Now, let's cook.
Proper cooking temperatures.
We know exactly how hot food is supposed to be, and we know how to measure it. This is a food thermocouple. I use it every day, maybe dozens of times a day. If you're cooking food or holding it at a hot temperature, you need one of these too, and you need to know how to use it. Be sure that it is a metal-stemmed, numerically scaled thermometer, or a digital readout thermocouple, accurate to within 2 degrees Fahrenheit, 1 degree Celsius. Wash, rinse, and sanitize the stem. When you take the temperature of food, measure it in more than one location. How hot is it inside? Check the thickest part, or the center, and you'll know. Okay, but how hot should it be? Well, that depends on the food. Poultry and stuffed meat, 165 degrees, 73.9 degrees Celsius. Ground beef, 155 degrees, 68.3 degrees Celsius. Pork, 150 degrees, 65.6 degrees Celsius in a conventional oven, or 170 degrees, 76.6 degrees Celsius in a microwave. Fish, 140 degrees, 60 degrees Celsius. These are the minimum temperatures. Some chefs like to take it to a higher and even safer temperature if it won't affect the quality of the dish. But it has to go at least this high with no interruption in the cooking process.
Safe serving.
Okay, we brought it out of storage, prepped it, cooked it, kept it out of the temperature danger zone as much as possible. Now it's time to do what this place is here for. Serve it to the customer. I could talk about that, but we've had enough from me. We need to go to the source, my coworker Sherry, our senior server.
Joe talked earlier about people handling food and how it could lead to contamination. That's because we all carry bacteria on our hands. But I want you to think of yourself not as a danger to your customer, but as a final barrier against the things that could hurt them. To begin, I'd like you to think of each dish, glass, and utensil in a new way. Instead of one piece, think of it as two pieces. The part where the food is, and the part where we as servers touch. The key here, don't touch anything where food touches or where a person's mouth may touch. Let's look at several examples, some right, some wrong. The entree is served. Wrong. The thumb is touching the inside of the plate and even touching the food. Regardless of its size, hold a plate by the bottom or the edge. A server transports several glasses. Right. Hold glasses near the bottom or by the stem. Never hold a glass near the top or place your fingers inside to carry it. A server places a fork on the table. Right. Hold flatware by the stem. Never hold flatware where the food will be or where a person's mouth may touch. A server stacks cups for transport. Wrong. Never stack cup and saucer combinations on top of each other. Hold cups by the handle. Hold cups and saucers individually or use a tray. A server removes ice from the machine. Right. Use a scoop or tongs to remove ice. Never use a glass or anything breakable, and don't touch the ice yourself. Self-service. Wrong. The guest is reusing a plate. Provide guests who return to your buffet or salad bar with a new dish. Keep the utensils stored in the food with the handles pointing out of the food. Food that is being held for guests must stay at 140 degrees or higher. In the same way that Joe explained earlier, use a thermometer to check the temperature. Stir the food to keep all parts at the proper temperature. Basically, you want to keep hot foods hot and cold food cold.
Thanks, Sherry. When food comes from hot holding, it should be at least 140 degrees or 60 degrees Celsius. When storing, it must be 40 degrees or 4.4 degrees Celsius or below. Well, going from 140 to 40, it's going to pass through what? The food temperature danger zone. That's right. And remember, we must try to keep it out of that zone as much as possible. Therefore, cool food rapidly, within 4 hours. For heavy, thick food like chili, use shallow pans with a product depth of 2 inches. Use a 3-inch food depth for more liquid food such as chicken noodle soup. If you're cooling a large piece of food such as a roast or ham, cut it into smaller pieces so it will cool faster. Use an ice water bath or a blast chiller. Use a thermometer to be sure the food is down to the proper temperature. Then, cover date and place them above raw food in the refrigerator. Quickly reheat the food to 165 degrees or higher. The food has to get up to that temperature within 2 hours, so never use holding equipment to reheat the food. Never mix raw food into cooked food or mix new food into old, and never reuse food more than once. In other words, no second chance for leftovers. If it's not eaten after being reheated, throw it out. All right? Those are the ground rules related to preparation, cooking, serving, and using leftovers. Remember, we have these rules for 2 reasons: to keep food out of the temperature danger zone and prevent food from becoming contaminated. If you keep that in mind, then everything we've talked about makes sense. And with that sense, you can see why we have a potential problem at Zachary Hall as we return to answer a case in point.
The answer to a case in point.
A prep cook at Zachary Hall took 40 pounds of meat out of the walk-in cooler. Then the phone rang.
You've got a phone call.
Oh, thanks.
Hey, you've got an awful lot of meat out here at one time.
Yeah, well, I got a lot to prep.
Aren't you going to take it back to the walk-in? Taylor!
Smart move. The prep cook did not use batch cookery. He took out all the meat he needed to prepare instead of small amounts that he could work on in a short period of time. He wasn't a barrier against unsafe food. That's a big part of our job. Prep it safe, cook it safe, serve it safe. Take care.